She's so that's my dad. She's like, I like her.
If we could go ahead and call our meeting to order, please. If I could ask everyone if they would please stand for a moment of silence. Then I'll ask Ms. Hammer to lead us in the pledge to the flag. And I apologize, the flag is not in the room. The flag is hanging on the front of the building. So with your indulgence.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Will. So, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Hammer? Present. Mr. Hampton?
Here.
Mr. Lesby?
Here.
Mrs. Lesby Mitchell?
Here.
Mrs. Tingle Sames? Here. Mr. Showalter?
Here.
Mr. Stein?
Here.
Mrs. Tackett?
Here.
Thank you. We not only have a quorum, we have a full house. Each council member should have received a copy of the minutes of our last meetings. Those were any possible corrections or additions.
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
Thanks, Al.
Second.
And thank you, Tony. If there are no questions or additions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Minutes are approved. Each council member should have also received a copy of our latest check register in your packet. You can indicate if you received that. Thank you. It is good to be back in person. We actually have some folks signed up for public comments. And I'll just start right from the list. First person to sign up is Mr. Dwayne Edelson. Pretty cool concept, Mike. I think, for the graduation parade.
Just stand in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, just in this way.
What do I do
the
with my
mic
hands?
can get you- the camera can get you.
Do what?
You're on camera and
Okay.
Mike's got you.
And that became a little bit more dangerous than we were comfortable with. So this year we're going to kind of pivot and come downtown with the parade and do it on foot. Worked with Captain Allgood and all the parties involved, and we'll have all three schools going through. They'll start around Georgetown College, Old Hinton Field, kind of go up through Maine, back around, very similar to the Christmas parade route. So just, formality as far as coming in, we've sent the state stuff, permit in and all that stuff. So just asking, it's May 25th at 6:30. That's a busy week.
Another way to engage the community with the graduates, particularly the downtown business.
Right, so they'll have different, we're not gonna make them wear their gowns out there, it'd be hot, but it's gonna be like, they'll have their school shirt on or something. We've got them all shirts, and we'll have some pep band type stuff going on, and cops and police and all that stuff going on. So it'll be fun.
Motion made.
Thank you.
Second.
Anybody?
Anybody?
That's an all. If there are no questions for Dwayne, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Good luck.
Thank you all, appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Let's see, also for public comments, Mr. Bill Robinson with the Scott County Historical Society.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. I am president of the Scott County Historical Society, and I'd like to invite everyone here and everyone watching online to an event this Sunday that will commemorate an important but little-known episode in local history. In 1824, as the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence was approaching, President James Monroe invited one of our founding fathers who lived in France to come tour the nation he had helped found and see what it had become and what it was becoming. And this was the Marquis de Lafayette, a French volunteer who was a key aide to General George Washington and was instrumental in the American final victory at Yorktown, Virginia. Lafayette by then had fallen out of favor in France and had given up his seat in the French Parliament. He accepted Monroe's invitation and embarked on a 2-year tour of the then 24 states. And after visiting Louisville, Frankfort, and Lexington, he stopped in Georgetown and Great Crossing on his way to Cincinnati. He visited with U.S. Senator Richard M. Johnson in the Great Crossing community, and had a gala reception at the Georgetown Hotel that featured a 500-pound wheel of cheese. As the first step in commemorating the bicentennial of Lafayette's tour, the Historical Society joined with several other local organizations, including the Georgetown Scott County Tourism Commission, and the local chapters of the Sons of the American Revolution and the Daughters of the American Revolution and the Great Crossing Baptist Church, to erect a historical marker commemorating Lafayette's visit to Scott County. The marker is already in place, but we will have an unveiling ceremony this Sunday that will be attended by French historian Julien Ischer, who is promoting the bicentennial of Lafayette's tour in conjunction with the French Consulate of Boston, Massachusetts. And at the unveiling, members of the SAR will be in period uniforms carrying period flags, and they will present the colors. And then after this brief ceremony, we'll go inside where it will be air conditioned, and Monsieur Ischer will speak along with the Georgetown College Professor of History Emeritus Lindsay Apple, and then refreshments will be served, but I'm afraid we will not have a 500-pound wheel of cheese. But thank you, and hope to see you this Sunday at 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. I had in my notes to make sure the council knew of this invitation, but you did a much more thorough job.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Mr. Richard King.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council persons. Just had a couple of questions, and it may be addressed tonight. If on the agenda you're going to be talking about the sewage treatment plant. A couple of questions was, were there any contingency clauses put in the contract when it was signed by the city, or there was a cost overrun where the city wouldn't be on the hook for it? And then secondly, if there's going to be a rate increase, is that going to be for water and sewer, just for sewer? Like I said, it may be covered tonight in the presentation and stuff, but those are just two questions that came to mind when I read the article in the newspaper and following the progression of the sewage treatment plant, the enlargement of the plant, and the problems that the city are encountering with the concrete and stuff. So I just want to throw that out there, and like I said, it may be covered tonight.
Mr. King, the facts of this case were so unusual that some normal clauses and contracts didn't quite cover the scope of what occurred here. But to answer your second question, each the water fund and the sewer fund each have to balance within themselves.
Okay.
So this would be a sewer rate increase only.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then other detail, there'll be a lot of further details that will evolve in this. And as we know, Chase or I will report them to the council in this meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So thank you. Mr. John Miller.
Mayor and council members, I'm a Georgetown resident, and my topic is the recycle center. I understand it's supposed to close the end of June.
Yes, sir.
And the question is, what do we do with our items that we need to dispose of that they now take? You can't take it to Fayette County because you got to be a Fayette County resident. So do we know where we're going with?
Large items will still be picked up by Republic, but you have to schedule it differently than you used to with Georgetown Public Works. So they're still gonna pick that stuff up, but you do have to call and schedule it.
They said they wouldn't pick up anything over 50 pounds. That still leaves air conditioning, condensing units, coils, small appliances, barbecue pits, What are we gonna do with those?
Andrew, I don't.
Yeah, don't forget that in our budget is $50,000 for the free community dump at Rumpke. That will help to alleviate. a lot
I
of it.
understand it's $30 for every time you go through there.
What we've done is we've worked out a pilot project where the city and county would co-fund 4 free dumps of 1 truckload at a time for all Scott County residents. So citizens 4 times a year, any day of the year, could take a truckload of stuff to the Rumpke transfer station and have it disposed of for free.
Okay, so we have
Historically,
to store it for months at a time?
Yes, you could, any time of the year.
Well, yeah, but suppose in February, I have an air conditioning unit that goes out, and then in April or May, I get something else. I mean, I'm using it one at a time down there, not a truckload. I don't have a truckload.
Understand. But as the mayor pointed out, most large items are acceptable to Republic. It's the ones that, like you said, have refrigerant or are too heavy that we have to make an exception. And that's what we're trying to do with that program.
So why couldn't we keep the recycle center open? Does it cost that much money to operate that? There's only several people over there.
the purpose of closing the recycle center is once we started offering curbside recycling to our residents, there was no need to duplicate the service. That was an additional, between city and county government, almost $260,000 a year to keep that center open. So there's a cost saving. Once we started offering curbside recycling, yes, we closed the recycling drop-off center.
You can't keep it open one day a week or several days a month or anything?
Just we closed the drop-off center, but you do have other ways you can get rid of those things.
So how do we get into Rumpke's? Do we have to have a
We have been.
password or what?
I'll address that question. We've been working on that program. The council and the court have allocated funds, but we have not yet put the program in place. We'll be doing it as soon as possible. Every resident will get 4 free dumps at the Rumpke transfer station on dates of their own choosing. You won't have to go to a landfill and drive up through the landfill. You'll be on paved ground. That is our solution.
Okay, I didn't know about the 4 free dumps.
That's coming.
And I also have the same concerns over the sewage treatment plant that this earlier gentleman had.
Yes, sir.
You know, it goes from 45 or 49 to 65 million. I know you have civil engineers employed here.
Yes, sir.
The question is why wasn't the work that was been done by the engineering firm, why wasn't it checked?
You may rest assured, sir, all those questions are being reviewed and will be continued to do so long into the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else for public comment? Thank you. Mayor's comments. We have several. We start with item A, under Mayor's comments, actually on the printed agenda. The presentation of the Rice Saving Award. Assistant Chief Allgood. Yes, sir. Is that your presentation? That's something the council's really looking forward to.
Lillian Moan, she here? Come on up. Nice to meet you, I'm there.
Nice to meet you.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
All right, so we want to tell everybody here what you did back on March the 3rd, okay? And we're going to give you an award, a couple awards. On March the 3rd, 2022, your acts of bravery and quick thinking helped save the life of Mariah White. Mariah had gone under the water in a hot tub at the pavilion, and by your quick actions of seeing this happen and pulling her out of the hot tub, to safety ultimately saved her life. In recognition of this act of bravery, we hereby present you the Georgetown Police Department Life Saving Award. Thank you for being an important part of the Georgetown community. Here is this. This award just like we would wear on our uniform, okay?
Thank you.
Chief Bossy said it. And also, the fire chief heard about what you did, and he wants to give you a couple of challenge coins from the fire department. Yeah, we'll get some pictures. You care to take a picture?
This is from Orion to you.
Good job, thank you.
Thank you all. That was one of the
Thank you.
special moments. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All this really is. Some other items on mayor's comments. The farmer's market is open. Big deal, and has been really well received. Again, something I know you're aware of, the graduation and proms around this community have just been wonderful.
Yes, it has.
I bet you've been looking at that.
Absolutely, it's been a good thing. It's been a good thing for us.
There's been more young couples and more graduation scenes. It's really a good time of year for all that stuff. Also, I want to let the council know that we received the invitation today for the NAACP banquet that will be held in June. So we'll give you all invitations to that, and we'll have a banquet. Two other things that I just wanted to let the council know about. I like to keep the council up to date of events and coming issues, so you can kind of anticipate those a little bit. Andrew, Chase, and I had the opportunity to attend in the last month or so a pretty well-attended meeting that was hosted by the Builders Industry of Kentucky, the former Home Builders Association of Central Kentucky. In Lexington location, a large gathering. We were there to talk to the group, but we also got to hear a presentation that was given by David O'Neill, who is the Fayette County PBA, looking at sales analysis of the Lexington market. Some things were pretty interesting. I'm going to ask Tim Jenkins about this because I would think the Lexington market is very similar to the Scott County market in some ways. David O'Neill said that last year in Fayette County, 1/3 of the home sales were to investors. Not families.
Not surprising.
Investors. That is a trend, that is a massive trend that is different from what I've expected in the past. And I just wanted to share that information. It seems to me that over time that would have I'm not sure what the outcome would be for neighborhoods and communities, but we should think about that. We can't change the market, but that's a statistic that I think is important. So many of these home sales are done to investors, and most of those investor sales have very little impact on their neighborhood. They're either verbos or Airbnbs, short-term rentals that the council's passed an ordinance to address. I'm glad the council's taken that step. But as Mr. Hunley reminded us, he was at our last council meeting. He wasn't in the city limits, but he had a problem with a larger short-term rental that was really disrupting his life. And it led me to remind us that our short-term rental ordinance is not complete. When we passed it, we indicated that it would have additional steps. And additional steps that would apply citywide. So just as we expected when we passed that ordinance, there's more to come, and that's when what y'all know continues to be, I think, an issue. The other issue that I wanted to bring the council up to speed on, just in case you all are asked questions about this, because sometimes you are. I know some council members have already been asked questions about this specific set of circumstances, so it led me to think that I probably should speak with the rest of the council. And it has to do with our neighbors to the north. We have always, Georgetown has enjoyed such a wonderful relationship with our neighboring cities, both Stanton and Sadeville. Those of you who have heard my State of the City addresses, I always try to recognize our city neighbors. Let folks know there are 3 cities in Scott County. We share the same types of problems. Ours are a little larger, but they are identical social issues that they face in Stanton and Sadeville. They don't have as many zeros on the end of some of the problems. It's kind of like us in Boyd County. But we have long had a very collaborative relationship with both cities. We surplus police cruisers in their way and help. We currently have a situation where, as you all know, we are treating the sewage from the city of Sadeville at GMWSS sewage treatment plant. There are certain limits to the amount of sewage that Sadeville can send in our direction, not because of our treatment plant capacities. Certainly they matter, but the real issue is that the pipes that convey sewage from the northern part of Scott County down to our part of Scott County are force mains. They're pump stations and force mains. And those force mains are at capacity. They're at operational capacity. And they simply can't take on more sewage flow in this direction. We've known that for some time. Chase and I have been aware of that for some time. I think the council has probably been aware of that for some time. We in the county helped with that sewer line when it was essential that we start treating the leachate from the landfill via sewer line as opposed to trucking it. And that provided one of the links to get this sewer line to Sadeville. Sadeville had their own sewer treatment plant. However, they did not have the population to operate the treatment plant. And it had continuous operating problems. It had extreme financial difficulties. And there was a point when GMWSS was asked to take over the treatment of that sewage because to continue to operate that treatment plant would have bankrupt Sadeville. Period. that was something that had to happen. Given that Mayor Wagner has been very energetic, I admire the mayor's enthusiasm and his efforts to promote Sandyville. He's been very strongly promoting the road project that would change the interchange and change the entrance road to Sandyville at an extremely high capital cost. During meetings of the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee, it was discussed that while the mayor was really working hard on some of those transportation issues, there were fundamental sewage issues that simply could not be overcome right now. That led to Mayor Wagner asking a question during the March Scott United meeting, asking for explanations about the sewer situation. The March Scott United meeting was actually a presentation by Ted Abernathy about our economic development strategy. Judge Covington asked if we could defer that conversation to a later meeting. Judge Covington invited me and Chase and Mayor Wagner to sit and discuss the sewer situation. When we arrived at the meeting, we realized that the member of the Planning Commission, the city board, two property owners and a developer also invited to the meeting. So it was awkward, but nonetheless, I think Chase and I gave, also the magistrate from that district, Mr. Osset, was there at the meeting. I think Chase and I gave a very honest appraisal of the current sewage availability in that direction, which is very, very limited. And the steps that would need to be taken to initiate that next step in that process. So you all will know, in the next 6 months or so, Chase intends to bid a hydraulic study of the existing sewer system. That study will take at least 2 years because it has to incur different seasons of weather to be a hydraulic model. That study will give the baseline data from which a future study could be done about ways in which sewer could be done toward the north. And yet still engineering plans would have to be drawn and very significant funding. This is a longer term project is what we wanted those at the meeting to understand. Since that time, I think the mayor's had a number of conversations with Judge Covington. He is not, I don't think, very pleased with the outcome of that meeting, and wants us to take more sewage so that exchange can develop. When I realized it was probably time to talk with the council about this, is in the last week or so, Chase has gotten calls from the Bluegrass Area Development District and from the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority. Asking him about the mayor's allegations and what are we doing to save it. And then it's being presented as Georgetown and GMWSS is shutting down Sandyville while we continue to grow ourselves. So I wanted you all to know that that is an unfortunate narrative that is from some of our state agencies. I will sue to some of our state and federal elected officials. But in the interest of Chase's professional reputation and the city's good relationship did get, I was pretty certain that we had handled it well. Later that evening, Magistrate Hostetler called me and thanked me for the way the meeting had been handled. That he thought it was a very sensitive meeting, that could have gone sideways, and he thanked me for helping that not to happen. We really tried to be a voice of reason and give good information.
Well, sadly, a lot of development in Georgetown taking 2 years to start doing anything.
So we'll work this out. Mayor's doing his job. Jay's doing his best to do his. But since these questions have been raised and they come to us from third-party agencies, it's very important to do this. Any questions on any of that?
Looks really big.
Okay. Then I guess we are actually at the budget presentation. So, Stacy, if I go first, then I'll turn it all over to you.
Sounds good.
Eighth budget that Stacy and I had presented together. So we've learned how each other are comfortable doing this. With Andrew's significant help in our department heads. It's a really important document. I've said to the council before, and I'll continue to point it out, it's the single most important policy document you consider on your own. So it warrants the work that goes into it, and it warrants the effort to really understand it well. There's always a lot of help that goes into the budget, but that was particularly true this year. We reported to you earlier that this was kind of a difficult budget to balance. The gap that we always have to shrink between expected revenues and expenditures was just very persistent. And all of them were reasonable expenses. That's the thing. When you start cutting things out and things really make sense. Stacy did good work. Andrew gave a lot of input into this. We asked the finance committee to get engaged earlier and more than we have in the past, and certainly our department heads. So I want to thank everybody for that. Each of you, I think, have 3 different documents. One is the formal budget document itself. It's got my budget address, which does have some pretty good information as far as outlining the structure and outlining the content of the city. This is just full of a bunch of line items. You'll find all the detail that you want in this document. The presentation that Stacy will go through with you, and that is a PowerPoint presentation. When we go through all of the slides in Stacy's PowerPoint, I can assure you, you will have a detailed understanding about what is in the budget and what is not in the budget, and what's been requested, and how we handle those things that we requested that we couldn't find. There's a third document, which is a spreadsheet that shows all of our either new, additional, or increased requests. Not the baseline request from last year, but all of these are new ones. And it breaks it down into 4 columns as to how we handled those new requests. Same information there is reflected in the PowerPoints. Between the document that outlines how we handled each new and additional increase and the PowerPoint presentation on the budget, you'll get a really good feel for it. A couple of things that I'd like to let you know before Stacy takes off with it is this budget does a handful of very positive things, and I'm pleased to present those parts of this budget. This budget shows us growing our revenue by 10% over prior year revenue. That's important. To me, that reflects actions that the council's already taken and shows the rewards from the actions you've already taken. So you are getting traction with the work you've done. We've been able to put this budget together with maintaining all of our headcount, maintaining our health insurance with no increased cost to the employees or reduction in benefits. And I'm pleased to say that we maintain all of the employee initiatives we started last year. We're not backing up from any of the headcount we added last year. I'm also pleased that this budget provides for a 5% cost of living allowance for all of our employees. This inflation rate is really harming people, and our citizens are feeling the 5% stretch toward helping them meet the effects of that inflation we thought was important. We were not able to give other pay increases. Almost every department asked for certain incentive pays, or training pays, or situational pays. All of them are justified, all of them are good, but we were not able to entertain those this year. So it does some very positive things. It does have some challenges in it. And those challenges were actually anticipated. We had talked about those over the analysis we've done over the last couple of years. And knew that at some point our expenses would catch up. The effects of this inflation rate and the effects of the sanitation department increases. I think Stacy's slides will show you that there's $777,000 worth of cost in keeping our word to a public works department and those employees. As a result of that, this budget does not have new headcount for police or fire. And in fact, there's only 2 raises in the entire budget that fall outside of the 5% COLA across the board, and only 1 new employee suggested for all of our headcount. Before Stacy goes into those details, what I wanted to let you know is the 2 salary positions that Stacy will point out is we have 1 employee going from a non-exempt to an exempt status, so they're no longer eligible for overtime. We look back at what we've done for other employees when they've lost that exempt status, and we're granting that same raise. But that's a change in status rather than an actual raise. The other salary that this budget must address will be the salary for your newly appointed city clerk in January. This budget will include 6 months of Tracy finishing her term as an elected city clerk at the existing salary. As of January, the new mayor is going to have to appoint a clerk. Hopefully they'll work on that over time, but we have established, we've looked at medians from KLC. This is slightly beneath median, but we have established the beginning salary for the new clerk as of January 1st at $80,000 per year. Those are the only 2 salaries that differ from the 5% cost of living. We have asked for 1 additional employee, and that additional employee, we think, if I can find the right title. We think, given the emphasis that the council has paid to the request by the not-for-profit agencies and the interest that is generated from the council, the court, and the community, we know those requests are very serious. And we know that the council has an intention of funding some of those requests for both capital and operating. What we will provide in this budget is a pool of funds that total $1.2 million that will be used for the council to allocate to ARPA recipients. I would like to ask a 4-person council committee to take on the responsibility of making those recommendations about how that $1.2 million will be allocated. I would like to ask, Willow, you've asked for hearings, transparency, openness, calls for applications. I'd like for you to serve on this committee. Tammy, I know that you've worked closely with some of these folks, and I would like for you to be on that committee. Todd, you've been interested and you represent yet another portion of Georgetown that I think you would do well on this committee. And earlier today, I already asked Greg if he would be the 4th member of that committee. What I think we want to challenge this committee to do on our behalf is to take $1.2 million and allocate that to all of the various agencies that have requested funding. Some have requested capital funding, very specific amounts for very specific projects. Some have asked for increases to their operational funding. Some have asked for both. It looks to me like for those social agencies and not-for-profits that ask for increases, they ask for about $65,000 more this year in operating funds than they asked for last year. We have allocated 0 of those increases.
But you didn't decrease.
We didn't decrease them. We left them right there. What this committee can do is, these are going to be one-time allocations because it's ARPA money is one-time money. But you may offer these folks capital allocations. If somebody makes a forceful case for a few more operating dollars in this year's budget, you could allocate additional operating funds to their budget. You will probably want to rehear from each of those agencies because not everybody had this set of ground rules. We want everybody to have equal shot. So if you four are willing, we would schedule presentations or conversations with the agencies. We'll do this budget as a placeholder for $1.2 million for you to do your work. And that's the way we propose to handle these very difficult questions about who should get which funding out of ARPA opportunities. To go hand in glove with that committee and spending of that money on social issues, we have taken, do I have that 2-pager, Andrew?
Housing prevention, don't believe we have it, I'm sorry.
I will, and I need to email this to the council. I've got a 2.5-page document that outlines need and bullet points of a position. Judge Covington began an initiative when he came in office to look at homelessness and housing insecurity and those problems. I applauded his effort. I did not participate on the committee. Devin did work pretty hard on that committee. The document you receive will show you clearly that the number one contributing issue to homelessness is lack of affordable housing. It's pretty clear. And what affordable housing opportunities we may have missed in this community, we may have. If we are going to have a focus on social agencies really working on homeless folks, people in crisis situations, needing that help, housing has to be a part of it. Judge Covington and I have talked, and I am proposing that we create a position of Affordable Housing Program Director, which I think would be a key position to work within the framework and the context of these social agencies, trying to find grants for affordable housing, how to work with developers to incent them to include affordable housing, things that don't happen unless you have specific expertise focused on it. What this budget proposes is that we fund 1/2 of that position for 2 years, with the assumption that Scott County Fiscal Court will fund the other half of the position for 2 years. Those 2 years being paid for with ARPA funds, which goes right to the heart of why ARPA funds are made available to Scott. So this budget has one new position that we think ties together some of the other efforts you'll see. Stacy, the other thing here, while this budget is light on capital, we are recommending with this budget that we go ahead with the renovation of City Hall. The building needs the renovation. We think we've got the right architect and construction manager team. At this point, council has considered that project in the form of paying cash to have it done, and you have the cash reserves to do that. I would recommend at some point in the future that you consider some debt of that renovation cost. You'll have 2 years to make that decision. The resolution that you pass will preserve that right from 2 years into the future. But I just offer that as something for your consideration later on. So with that said, Stacy, why don't I just you start going through all of the detail.
All right. All right, good evening. It's my favorite time of year. Andrew. Ah, there we go. All right. Probably can't read this. I'll read it to you. I will email this presentation out to everyone tomorrow so that you'll have this as well. So to highlight, the projected general fund revenues for fiscal year 2023 are $30.8 million. As the mayor mentioned, this is a $3 million or 10.9% increase in projected revenue over last year. Our 2022 budget did include about $2 million of ARPA funds to help cover operating expenses. So for typical recurring revenue, we are showing growth of $3 million. For the proposed general fund expenses, we are proposing $31,870,865 of operating expenses. I excluded the transfer for City Hall just for these purposes so that you could compare to last year. Our fiscal year 2022 general fund expenses are about $30.5 million. So it's about a $1.3 million or 4.2% increase in proposed operating expenses. As of now, as a placeholder budget, I have about $10.3 million showing as a transfer to capital projects of one-time funds for the City Hall renovation. The proposed budget, again, speaking only for operating purposes, uses about $1,069,552 of prior year revenues to balance the operating budget. Again, that's excluding the City Hall number. That'll be a transfer for that renovation. But I wanted you to be able to see the recurring expenses, recurring revenues as their own items, since City Hall is a one-time special project. And the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget utilizes the remaining 6.7 million of ARPA federal funding. And I do have a slide a little bit later that will show exactly how that 6.7 million is proposed to be spent. Looking at some of our big revenue categories, just so you can get an overview of how they are changing from fiscal year 2022. The bottom one for taxes, this includes property taxes, motor vehicle taxes, bank deposit taxes. Our proposed or projected revenues are $2,875,000. Our occupational license fees, which includes net profits and payroll taxes, are projected together to be $17,003,000. Employee withholding is projected to increase compared to the budget. The fiscal year 22 budget was $13.6 million. The fiscal year 2023 budget projects $14.75 million. For net profits in the 2022 budget, we budgeted very conservatively because we were still not sure how the effects of the pandemic would affect the 2021 tax returns. Our local economy has stayed strong. So in 2022, we only budgeted $1 million for net profits. And in fiscal year 2023, we are budgeting 2.2. So recurring net profits, we usually do get between 2.5 million. So like I said, we budgeted conservatively this year just because of not sure how the lingering effects of the pandemic might happen. For permits and licenses, this includes our insurance premium tax, which you increased to 8% July 1 of 21, and that is $6,308,300 for that category. Our franchise fees, we are projecting $1,932,000. That does include a little bit of an additional, about $200,000 additional expected franchise fees from our Republic franchise for our residential and commercial Herbie service. And our intergovernmental revenues, which majority of that is our interlocal agreements with the county, we are budgeting $2,307,593. This chart just shows, illustrates our general fund revenue trends since 2013. So you can at least hopefully see the blue line. 2013, we projected around 20 million in revenues, and in 2023, we are projecting 30.8. So over the last 10 years, we have grown our budget $10.8 million for recurring revenue. 2016 has a little bit of a peak because that was a year we received an amended, it was a net profits tax return. So that year was a little high, that's why it peaks up and drops back down. But we have seen steady growth, and we've talked about that frequently with our local economy being strong and having that growth. This is just focusing on our two largest, this is employee withholding. You can kind of see the dip in 2022, again, we budgeted conservatively, $13.6 million this year. We do our budget before we've received our full year of revenues. We ended 2021 with $14.6 million. So we are budgeting $14,750,000 for 2023, which I feel is still a conservative number compared to what we collected in 2021. But at our last quarterly revenue our last quarterly revenue report, I had mentioned we were about 50,000 ahead of where we were this time last year. So still a conservative number because we're not showing huge growth, but some growth. Again, that kind of outlier in 2016 because of a very large amended return. In 2021, we received $2,067,000. We budgeted very conservatively this year, so we're projecting $2.2 million in net profits for 2023. Expenditure changes from the fiscal year 2022 budget. Our administration expenses actually decreased a tiny bit. Some of that's due to debt. I think our debt payments have gone down ever so slightly since last year. Building inspection is up just a tiny bit, mainly due to the COLA. Police and fire have our largest increases, but they are our largest departments personnel-wise, so the 5% COLA, as well as a 5% increase and the CERS hazardous rate are greatly contributing to the increases in those two departments. Public Works, you see 3.3 million. As the mayor mentioned, we are absorbing the sanitation and recycling staff, so that is obviously the biggest chunk of the increase in Public Works. Our interlocal and nonprofit budget is staying fairly stagnant, around 6.6 million. Our transfers to other funds, compared to last year for our recurring, each year we transfer money for our business park debt, to cover stormwater, and to fund our portion of cemetery. And that is $858,000 in the upcoming budget. And again, I kept the 10.3 million proposed transfer for City Hall out of the chart just so it doesn't distort, so you can compare our recurring expenses. And this is just a pie chart showing an overview by department so that we can see where we spend the majority of our money. Police, I'm trying to tell by the color. Police, we spend 29% of our budget with police and 23% of our budget with fire. So 52% of our general fund budget is spent on public safety. The next 18% is our interlocals, which includes our county interlocal departments, Parks and Rec, Revenue Commission, Planning and Zoning. And pretty much stays about the same every year, but we only spend 10% on administrative, executive, legislative expenses. I'll definitely read this one to you. Salary and benefits. As the mayor mentioned, all employees are recommended to receive a 5% cost of living increase. That was something that was important during our finance committee discussions due to the inflation that is affecting everyone. The additional salary adjustments he already mentioned for the HR specialist, $7,500. The status change had already taken place, but there was no salary increase given at the time of the status change, and we went back and looked at what we had done for other employees who had made similar status changes. And we mentioned the city clerk's change in salary effective January 1 as well. I did want to mention one thing. The changes the mayor mentioned affect the general fund and ARPA fund. Dispatch funds that the council passed in October 2020. They did request an increase of starting pay from $18 an hour to $21 an hour. We went back and looked at the KLC wage survey and some comparative numbers that they had given us for others, and we did settle on the $20 an hour for that. So that's an increase of $2 per hour for the dispatch. That is fully funded within the 911 service fee. The general fund is not contributing anything to dispatch. They are still having trouble filling their vacancies. They still have 3 vacancies in their full-time positions right now. We want to try to help them get certified dispatchers in so that they don't have to send them to Richmond for training. So we're working on that for them. They're not receiving this on top of a COLA. So the $2 per hour is it for them. It's not 5% plus $2. It's just the $2. The salary adjustments requested but not funded. Building inspection requested an additional 5% on top of COLA. We, as part of the committee, we all felt this was very much deserved. They did not receive salary adjustments at the same time as everyone else when we made the big sweeping changes over the last year and a half. However, we would like to, much like we did with dispatch, tie those increases to revised fee schedule. So in the near future, the council will be presented with a revised fee schedule for building permits. And much like we did with the 911 service fee, we would tie those increases to that revised fee schedule at that time. The police department requested to increase starting pay for police officers to $55,000. We felt we couldn't do that at this time, especially since we could not do the same for other departments. Right now, police and fire have the same starting pay. This would have made it unequal again. But it's not that we don't feel that it's deserved. We just didn't have the funds to be able to do it for both departments at this time. And the police department was the one that made the request. The fire department requested $5,000 stipends for 3 ladder truck operators. That was something we chose not to do at this time. And again, I already mentioned dispatch that we didn't fund the additional $1 per hour. The CERS rates for fiscal year 2023, hazardous is increasing from 44.33% to 49.59%. So for every dollar in salary, we're contributing almost 50 cents towards retirement for hazardous. That is approximately an additional $337,790 in this budget. As the mayor mentioned, proposed employee contributions for medical, dental, and vision remain the same. And the proposed general fund salary adjustments and COLA are expected to cost approximately $709,600. So that is general fund only, does not include the dispatch since they are separately funded. The personnel overview, the mayor's already spoke to a lot of this. Cost is approximately $777,000 to retain all of our sanitation and recycling employees in public works. We are still 2 positions above what our new organizational chart and ordinance allows. So through attrition, through retirements, through people who voluntarily leave, we still have 2 positions that we will eliminate. And that could be anywhere between $100,000 to $180,000 savings, depending on the employee's salary and level of benefits that they have selected. We did add, again, in the dispatch fund, he requested 2 part-time dispatchers. They have been filling in, especially with having vacancies. Dispatchers are working long hours, and those part-time positions, he currently has 2. And he requested 2 more. We funded 1 out of the 911 fund to help cover between shifts. It helps give a little bit of relief to those dispatchers who are working 12-hour shifts and covering all those vacancies that we have right now. The mayor already mentioned the Affordable Housing Program Director. That $131,760, although that's the cost for 1 year, that would cover 2 years of expense for us, because this is a step we would only take if the county comes on board and splits the cost with us. So the first step was funding this in ARPA, then we would bring forth an interlocal agreement and then a personnel ordinance. So there will be 3 different steps of approval for this.
Does that include benefits?
Yes, it is, I believe, an $80,000 salary. And of course, we always budget for full family benefits on our most expensive plan because we don't know what the person will take. So it could be quite a bit less, but again, this is if the county comes on board with us and council approves the interlocal and personnel ordinance that will go with it. The following positions were unfunded. So in the police department, we have had a few part-time positions that have not been filled for several years, but we had continued to fund them. So we just decided, we looked at that and we're like, okay, these haven't been filled for quite some time. The part-time safety officer and 3 of the part-time crossing guards. We only have 1 crossing guard currently on staff, just through attrition. They have left, and then we've never filled those again. I believe, this is Chief can correct me if I'm wrong, I think our crossing guard maybe does a little of the downtown parking surveillance when she's not doing school crossing guard duty, especially in the summer. And then we are deferring the following positions to a future budget. 4 police officers. I put 4. We did give them an additional sergeant recently in the personnel ordinance. And so our plan was 5 additional officers. We did give them the sergeant, so this is showing 4 officers being deferred, 5 firefighters, and 1 part-time dispatcher being deferred to a future budget.
Those few positions that were unfunded, it was just in the interest of having a more accurate budget. We weren't really using them. It left funds for the department to transfer if they needed to use later, but we don't budget what we need, so we just had to.
We also, don't forget that we reallocated some of that money to a particularly important project.
Yes. there was a capital project, you're correct. You'll see a little bit later, the patrol remodel. So when we did take away some of those unfunded positions, we did put back a capital project that we had previously taken out. All right, take a breath. Proposed capital expenditures. General government, we've talked about City Hall renovation, $10.3 million for, I put engineering, that should have said architects. Construction management and construction. Typically, with capital projects that we want to fund out of fund balance, I make the full transfer for the budget at the beginning of the project, and then those funds live in the capital project fund until it's completed. So those funds are earmarked for that project. Again, you can choose to reimburse yourselves later if you want. We have 4 projects that are kind of carryovers. Cardinal Drive, our CMAC grant match, West Main Street, our TAP grant match, the South US 25 sewer line project, that's about $19.6 million. The vast majority of that is our KIA loan. There's a little bit of local contribution from the city, county, LFUCG, but the bulk of that's the KIA loan. And then our business park fund, we've continued to carry over $525,000 for gas line construction or installation. Those gas lines are only installed once the lots are purchased and they start building on them. So we haven't had that yet, so I continue to carry that over as a placeholder. Those last 4, the funds were previously transferred in previous budget years to the capital projects fund and to the business park fund, so they do not require an additional transfer in this year's budget. Enterprise fleet management vehicle replacement. As anyone who's probably tried to buy a vehicle lately has realized, the automotive industry, there's a lot of delays in manufacturing. There's not a lot of cars on the lots. That's impacting us and our lease management program as well. So the budget as currently presented does not include any funds for new lease payments during fiscal year 23. We will work with Enterprise to come back to council at a future date to talk about how we can potentially order those, get council approval for ordering any replacements. But in speaking with our account rep, it would probably be fiscal year 24 before we get the vehicles. So it's been very difficult. We still have cars we've ordered last year that we don't have. So it's been a very difficult market to navigate.
We were really getting close to having all of our light-duty fleet on rotation. I think it would be real beneficial for us. So this will hurt that rotation and let us get more vehicles at one time than we really wanted to.
Yes, we were right at the point where we were about to reap the full benefits of the program, because you start turning over the leased vehicles, and that's when you really start saving the money on an annual basis. And unfortunately, the market is just a little crazy right now. This is just a chart that kind of shows some of the capital expenditures we already talked about. Funded FY23 means it was funded in the general fund, except for dispatch. That one is its own fund. Fund with ARPA. ARPA is one-time funds. We don't want to use that for recurring expenses, but we did use it to supplement some of these capital expenses that we could not have otherwise squeezed into this budget. Purchase in fiscal year 22 means we've discussed with our departments, and they have a little left over in line items here or there that they are going to try to make those purchases before June 30th to kind of squeeze them into this year's budget. Otherwise, they would have been deferred until a later year. And then obviously the final column is defer. I'll go over quickly what a couple of those are. For the general government, the 10.3 is City Hall, the 90,000 fund with ARPA, the property that we bought at 514 South Broadway, we're getting ready to demolish. You'll have a memo for that a little later in the meeting. This is to set aside some money for future park improvements. The idea was to turn part of that into a stormwater feature and part of it into a park. So we're just earmarking a little bit of money for that. And to defer $50,000, we had a request from a couple of departments through HR to create a wellness incentive program, you know, the Fitbit thing where you take so many steps, but the cost of the platform and then the cost to purchase incentives for rewards. We've deferred that to a later year. For police, we funded the patrol remodel and the new computers that go along with that. They want to make that space more functional for their patrol staff. Almost, think of probably almost like a computer lab setting where they'll have terminals that they can use. So we did fund that for them so they can make that space work for them. The switch and server we're going to purchase in fiscal year 22. Those are critical upgrades that need to be done for technology. We are deferring portable radios, which would have been for the new officers they're not getting. The taser replacement, Captain Nash said could wait one more year. And the vehicle equipment, because it'll be a while before we get the vehicles. So for fire, we put that in ARPA. We have 1.4 million for fire engines. We've had a lot of, as you know, we came to you recently to buy a 1993 used fire engine that we were having to lease. We have I believe our ladder truck in the shop until June. So this is to fund most likely 2 new engines. So we're working on bid specs for that so that if it does get approved in the budget, we can get that bid out for those.
How long will that take?
Well, if we build them, it can take 2 years.
Build
18
times
months.
are 19 to 22 months currently.
But a lot of times we can receive a discount for paying half up front, so we want to have the funds set aside. With ARPA, the deadline to spend funds is December 2024, but if you have a contract in place, you actually have until 2026 to spend the funds. So really, 2024 is the deadline to have a contract in place.
What are they gonna use it for?
So, and then the other small projects are to replace the bay roof, the flat roof on Station 3. They've repaired it all they can and it's still leaking. We got to maintain our buildings. We don't want to have water issues and some cylinder packs. And then we deferred a ladder truck. We're deferring that for now. I think we purchased our last ladder truck in 2014. So we're hoping to get that repaired and back going, but we'll defer the purchase of that. And then there were some other building improvements that they had wanted to make to West Clinton, where that building we acquired or traded with for GMWSS. So we're deferring that. Public Works is going to purchase their mower out of this year's budget. I think they've already done that. And they're deferring a street sweeper and a bobcat and a wood chipper, which the street sweeper is something that if we are able to get a stormwater utility fee in the future, that's exactly the kind of purchase that could come out of that. So we want to defer that for right now, see what happens.
That larger street sweeper that we need for our permitting requirements is a $400,000 street sweeper. We took it out of the budget this year, but it's in there.
Parks and Rec, we funded a lot of their capital projects with ARPA. Some of these council has already been approached about. $250,000 set aside for matching the grant for the Ed Davis playground equipment if they get that grant. $750,000 for the HVAC replacement that council has already been approached about. So that is $1 million of it. And then I won't go into everything, but they had some annual maintenance they need to do, a couple of trucks that are 18 plus years old. So if they can find the trucks, we're approving the funds to replace them, and a master plan as well. And then we deferred about $214,000. And in your new request spreadsheet, you have all that detail on the Parks and Rec capital improvements. So I won't go into every single one. EMS, the city half of our building of the new station. Originally, the number that had been given to me was 2.25. So once we get those final costs.
We're pretty certain that this number will not be 2.25. We think it's going to end up being 2.5. But I'm going to suggest to you that we fund that additional amount in the future budget cycle. If we try and fund it here, we're really going to impact our community fund that we're trying to preserve. And I'm just not willing to do that.
Yeah, And we're setting aside 2.25 of ARPA funds, but obviously not, that full amount will not be spent in fiscal year 23.
And there may be some general fund allocation that has to go along with it.
They still have to design the building, bid the building out. Construction will take a while, so it will not all fall into fiscal year 23.
Have we used all the ARPA funds in this budget?
Yes,
Okay.
they're allocated. They won't be spent yet, but we have allocated every last penny of it.
You put them in a box
Okay.
for some use.
Okay. I was trying to add in my head here, we're getting to.
Yeah, there will be a slide that shows you exactly where the full 6.7 has gone, but stormwater, I won't go through every one of those in detail, but the ARPA money is carrying over Bourbon Street. We've already started the engineering on that, and there are various other projects. Dispatch, that's new office furniture, and cemetery is a new tractor. I will say the stormwater budget is pretty much the same as last year. There were no significant increases. It was maybe $10,000 more, which part of that's due to COLA because we allocate part of their salaries to the stormwater budget. Operating and maintenance expenditures. Our interlocal operating expense request increased by $420,266. Again, that's on your spreadsheet, but that's ambulance, EMS operating, electrical, animal, parks and rec.
Is most of that based on salary increases and?
I would say most of that is based on inflation and salary. I'd have to look at the exact amounts on here. It is on
What page?
this new request. I don't have the detail because it's the county budgets. The ambulance operating is the bulk of that. It's $222,000. Parks and Rec is $111,000. We have had significant conversations with Parks and Rec, and a lot of that is due to a 5% COLA and inflation of utilities, fuel, the same things we're seeing our departments have to deal with. Community service, nonprofit, the mayor already talked about. We did receive new or additional requests of $413,000, and that is going into the pot. Well, not going into automatically, but rather than fund those from the general fund, our committee will consider those as allocating the ARPA fund money. We've already talked about Parks and Rec, the $111,000 for operating expenses, which is in that number at the top. And then the Ed Davis Center is solely funded by the city and has a $12,050 operating budget increase for salaries and just general operating expenses.
Judge and I sat down and just went back, and Kim Rice with Parks and Recreation is relatively new. So we wanted to review some of the history of some of these parks and how they've been supported over the years. And Ed Davis Park has always been a city enterprise, and Brooking Park has always been a county enterprise. Yeah, it doesn't mean it always has to stay that way, but it has up until this point, and it's always been self-elected. So there were just some of those responsibilities that were a little distinct. Kim's operating budget had intermingled some of them, and just for historical clarity, we asked that those be, Judge and I agreed that we should back those out until the council incorporate policy decisions on something.
And you'll see that when you look at Parks Capital, you'll see there's a couple of things that are at Brooking, and it says county only, and I think the county has agreed to, well, either they will or they won't, but they'll fund those in their budget if they so choose. Planning and zoning budget request actually decreased by $772, but that's because their revenue streams are recovering now that the economy's kind of back up and running. Line item increases. Our departments requested line item increases of approximately $500,000 just throughout. Only critical line item increases are recommended. Fuel, utilities. We backed out pretty much anything that wasn't absolutely necessary as far as line item budget increases. Overtime for police was increased by $36,000 and fire by $5,000. They were both requested overtime increases, and we did grant those.
This year's budget on the overtime on both those departments, did they stay within budget or did they go over budget?
the original budget for police, they're probably going to go over, but it's because they've had vacancies. So their salary line item is going to be under. But they have requested that their overtime be increased just due to, of course, rising cost, and then to cover some of those vacancies. And if they get uncertified officers who have to be trained, then obviously that takes time as well. So these are the other funds, and just a big snapshot. The largest one is I believe that's the grant fund. It is the grant fund. No, this ARPA fund, 6.7 million, 40%. So obviously that's an unusual one. We don't have that every year. The 2.5 million is the grant fund, and 2.7. Trying to see. I can't read my colors. Should have written it down. It's probably dispatch. Yes. Matching up my colors. I'm sorry. Dispatch is the 2.7 million, which again, dispatch is for the city's purposes currently funding itself due to our 911 fee. The county still pays their half of dispatch expenses, and then our half is covered by our 911 fee. We do not share that fee with the county, so it strictly goes towards the city's half of the expenses. So just a snapshot of those. The Environmental Services Fund is going to look drastically different than what it has looked in the past, because we are essentially down 2 departments. So for the Sanitation Fund, well, first I'll talk about the fund balance. Our anticipated fund balance at June 30, 2022 for environmental services is $968,000. And we will bring this back to you for review at a future date to make sure, of course, legally, if we're able to transfer any of that money to the general fund, and then also just to see how our first so many months of our new franchise agreement go, because GMWSS is collecting our revenues, but then the city is responsible for paying the bill to Republic. So there's always a chance there could be a discrepancy in timing of collection of revenue versus when we have to pay. We'll need to audit the bills, make sure everything is being billed correctly on Republic's end to us. So we will come back at a future time and discuss how we could potentially transfer some of that money to the general fund. But it's not in this budget. We just want to give that a few months to see how it goes. And of course, legally make sure we use it in an appropriate manner. Since it was generated by sanitation fee revenue, we want to make sure we use that appropriately now that our sanitation services have ceased. So all you'll see in the sanitation fee is an in and out revenue and expense. Collections from GMWSS and then being paid out as professional services to Republic for their collection. And then as mentioned, as we've talked about already in this meeting, the recycling center is slated to close operations by June 30th, 2022, so there's no budget in for that. Any bills received beyond July 1 will still be paid out of this year's budget for those. We did, I think, increase Public Works utilities just a little bit, because I don't know when we'll officially close the building or shut off utilities. So in the Public Works department, we increased utilities a little bit to make sure utilities in that building are still running as long as they may need to. And as mentioned before, stormwater expenditures are $655,227, which is about $10,000 more than the previous year. This slide details, we anticipate receiving the balance of our ARPA funds prior to June 30th. So all of that revenue for ARPA will have been received in fiscal year 2022, the full $9 million. So for fiscal year 23, we won't have any revenue, but we will be spending the balance of the budget, which is approximately 6.7. We've talked to you about just about everything on this list. There's a couple of carry forwards, carryover for Bourbon Street. We're going to be carrying over about half of what we allocated for the sidewalk program. We've had a good response on it, but we still have about half to spend, so we're carrying that over. Talked about Parks and Rec and using it for the city's half of the new EMS station. So I think we've already talked about everything there, but it does allocate the remaining 6.7 million that we've not spent or previously committed as of today. The last thing I'll show is projected general fund balance. The large dip in fund balance of 2019 is when we used cash to pay for our half of the business park expansion and the 911 radio system. We partnered with the county on those projects. We paid for both with cash. And you will see that we project 2023 that we will end with approximately $9.7 million fund balance if we use cash to pay for City Hall plus the $1 million that we're anticipating dipping in for revenue in this budget. So that's all I have, unless anyone has questions.
Stacy?
If you want to go back one slide real quick,
Yeah.
just point out something. The difference in, the mayor said earlier, 1.2
Oh, yes.
for philanthropy, and I said 1.2. I think we made a last minute adjustment to 1.1 and the
You're right. I think it was.
difference is that-
I think it was the 90,000 we set aside for the 514 South Broadway Park. That was a last minute change.
1.1 million.
So 1.1. So, yeah, you're right. Thank you, Andrew, for reminding me of that.
That, I recognize that we've given two different numbers there. Thank you.
Sorry about that, that's my fault.
So the number is 1.1.
It's 1.1.
Can you hold there for a second?
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that we talked about during our budgeting process, and I kind of want to share it with everybody here, is the fact that the ARPA funding is picking up a lot of expense that normally would be coming out of our general revenue. You can look at the tabs there and essentially start at the top, the 131. You know, I mean, that ARPA funding wouldn't cover something like that. It's just something that obviously is going to happen. But a couple of the big ones, the fire trucks, you know, the 1.4 million, you know, we got a gift in ARPA.
Mm-hmm.
The stormwater repairs, the nonprofits, that doesn't really count. That's out of the ordinary. I mean, that's not something that we would typically be able
Right.
to do. The dump day, I think that's a great thing, and, yeah, that's something we typically come out of general fund. Sidewalk program, we've done it in years past, it's been successful, I'm certainly all for that again. Park improvements, I don't know, you know, that could be or couldn't be, either way, just kind of a matter of opinion, not right or wrong. The 1.2 million for Parks and Rec, you know, we've got to do that. And again, ARPA is picking up the tab on that. And
Yeah.
then the biggest is the 2.2 for our portion, or 2.5 perhaps, our portion of EMS, which we have to do. I haven't added all those up, but if it wasn't for ARPA, we'd be way underwater. And that's what kind of
Yeah.
concerns me going forward. And it probably needs to concern all of us going forward, because
Yeah.
right now, we've kind of hit the lottery with the ARPA. And that's not something we're gonna be able to depend on or live on going into the future. So that just needs to be something that we all think about today, tomorrow, work on this. You know, I'm not saying I
Yeah.
have the answer, but it's, you know, there's something we're gonna have to deal with.
And I know Andrew's mentioned in our discussions, you know, maybe at some point when we can cover our operating expenses with our revenue, if we get to that point where operating revenues can exceed our expenses, setting aside kind of a sinking fund in the capital projects.
Yeah,
But that takes time to build up. We've got a lot of projects
it does. It
that
does.
are critical now. And right now, we don't have that luxury because our operating revenues are not higher than our,
So this goes back to
Expenses.
the conversations that we had last year when the mayor advocated, you know, for the city, on the city's behalf, trying to figure out how we're gonna deal with this. Because you all did the projections, Andrew, you know, and you, Stacy, the mayor, put together, you know, the proposal or
the financial analysis.
the analysis. And it showed what the future looked like. The future got here a little quicker than we anticipated.
Yeah.
You know, so that's not going away. And I don't know if it's an elephant in the room or not, but it needs to be thought about seriously.
Yes.
And police and mayor and financial committee, was there, I know at one time we talked about using some of the funds for police cameras. I know the county had been able to do that. Did that come up in the discussions? Where do we stand with that?
Well, the body cameras did come up in that discussion, and it had been my hope that we would use a portion of ARPA funding to address the body camera issue.
Okay.
I even, with our group that worked together so diligently for a year, I reported to that group that I thought we were there.
Yeah.
That I thought we were gonna match the county with that effort. This budget does not have the funding for body cameras included.
Do we know how much, was there a number put on it?
There's two numbers that go forward in perpetuity. There's about $140,000 to $150,000 a year for the camera systems. And then our department asked that we only take this step when we can hire a non-sworn dedicated clerk to keep up with all of the tapes in their inventory. So between the position and the cost, it was a $200,000 plus initiative. We did not get it in this year's budget. That'll have to be considered in a future budget.
That was an annual cost.
That's an
Recurring.
annually recurring cost.
The storage cost for the data, and then of course, obviously someone to maintain it. I know Captain Nash and we attended a grant webinar about body cams and some federal grants that are out there for those. But to seek those grants, you need to spend several months preparing what your program and policies are going to look like. So I think that's a good starting point for that if we want to pursue some of that grant funding. It is out there.
Thank you, Will. I should have mentioned that.
Yeah, I would still be interested in trying to see if we can pursue that.
Those are not included in this.
I am on the police committee too, we talked about it there, that it isn't the cost of the cameras, we can afford that. It's just that you can't do it if you don't have the infrastructure behind it to, house the tapes and have a body there that would give those out when they're requested. And those are expenses that can't be covered by ARPA because they're ongoing expenses that we have to figure out how to fund.
To be real clear for the council and the public, the police department is not opposed
No.
to body cameras in any
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
They're willing to do whatever their public asks them to do in that regard. We simply, I don't think we're in a position to fund this cameras at this point.
Does the county, did the county hire someone to keep up with the data collection?
No, ma'am.
Do we know how that's working out?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I know he stays very busy. Last I heard, it was a lieutenant at the sheriff's office, and he stays busy doing the open records requests, because those double, triple, because, anytime they go to a traffic crash or any call that they go on, the insurance adjuster wants open records, they want the video of the wreck and all that stuff. So it's caused a lot more work for this lieutenant, who should be dedicating his time to his shift, his patrol guys, and all. So he's trying to juggle both. So I'm sure it's.
So they would have to be looking at figuring a way.
So our chief posse asked, the department is more than willing to wear the cameras. The chief posse did ask that if the council wishes to go this direction, that we hire a non-sworn officer to make sure that we can keep track of all of these tapes in the inventory. I'm sure the sheriff is doing it real well. We chose a different approach.
Okay.
So, but that clarity is necessary, because I told people we would fund those below, and we have not.
I just want to make sure I hadn't missed it.
Mayor, just clarification. I know Karen had asked the question earlier. If this budget passes, all of the ARPA money is going to be allocated. There's not going to be anything left of the ARPA funds, correct?
Other than the committee that will come back to the council on how to spend that $1.1 million.
our fund balance right now is
21,
right at
around
$21 million. And did I hear correctly that if this passes, it's gonna be in less than 10, slightly less than 10, correct?
If you continue to decide to pay cash for all of the city hall renovation, I think at some point it would be a wise financial decision for you to consider some debt for that. But again, that can be a decision for a future council.
Well, that was gonna be my, that was my next question. Where do you feel comfortable as mayor, where that fund balance, that kind of sweet spot that we really want to try to stay above moving forward?
Mark, we've kind of shot for that $10 million mark. And when we were comfortable bringing you the renovation of City Hall is when through budgeting and savings, we were able to increase our carry forward balance to just over $21 million. We knew then that the council could either choose to pay for the City Hall renovation in cash and still maintain a cash reserve of about $10 million. Or, and that's something, again, with the bonding resolution that you passed, you've got 2 years to actually make that decision, depending on what your needs might be down the road.
Okay. But I don't mean to put you on the spot. Your gut instinct says we need to keep it at least $10 million, at least that amount.
I think, yes, Mark, and as the budget grows bigger, eventually that number may need to grow just a little bit. But I think it's a very robust cash reserve right now.
And it's about a 30% fund balance, so that's quite robust.
Yeah, it's
compared
robust
to-
now, and it lets us consider these type of expenditures. I wouldn't dare discuss it with the council if we didn't have those kind of reserves to protect us.
So what is our debt are we carrying right now?
I'm trying to remember, I ran that number for the finance committee the other day. I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head if it was around 10.
Yeah, close to 10.
It was around 10.
Point something, 10.
Yeah.
There's
brought it
4
down.
different
Yeah.
programs that we're still paying for.
As far as debt, yes, there's a little bit on the business park, the aquatic center, the police department, and then there was a refinancing that was done before I got here. It was refinanced in 2014 that includes, I think, a myriad of previous capital projects or previous debt kind of lumped into one. I'd have to research what those were.
Well, the city financially is a lot better off than it was, let's go back several years, because several years ago, we had $3 million, it was actually less than $3 million when I came in office, in the bank, in the fund balance, and we had 16 million in debt. So with the mayor's suggesting you keep 10, you got 10, you're covering what your debt is, which is what's supposed to be good theory for your own finances, so that you have your savings, so to speak. So, much better off than what we have been in the past.
We certainly are from a reserve perspective, but I'm worried about a cash flow perspective.
Well, you've got that problem, and I am a little concerned, we don't know what's gonna happen, but they keep talking about in our third quarter that the recession will start based on the things that we're seeing. So it does worry me a little bit what will happen with with some of these big capital projects, what was gonna happen if we start to have a recession. Because the fund
Been our
balance can
concern
disappear
too.
quickly.
Yeah, we talked about that too,
Yes, sir, Mark.
Sorry, I didn't mean, I'm jumping around, I apologize. Just thought of something that David just kind of brought up something. On the hazmat retirement,
Yes,
it has basically going up about 6 percentage points.
about 5%, yes, from
5%.
44 point something to 44.33 to 49.59, so 5.2%.
And if we covered this, my apologies. I think we've talked about this in the past. Do we have a projection of where that's going? Because that's a pretty big expense.
Was there one more year of increases, Andrew? Or was this the final year?
They gave us a set schedule, Mark, and it had a series
should
of
have had that.
increases that then plateaued, and I think we're nearing the plateau.
I think this may be the last year of increases, but I can, I'll make a note to get that out to council. I can pull that schedule up and see.
We're talking about
The slated, it was like a 5-year increase of CERS rates that the state
it was
implemented.
ending this year for non-hazardous and next year for
Yeah.
hazardous.
Because non-hazardous is actually going down this year. So I do believe it's the last year for hazardous, but I will confirm that, and when I email the PowerPoint, I'll share that with council.
That way, Mark, we were able to build in those known pension increases into the future financial analysis we showed you. And that was part of the cost of the new.
David, to your point about cash flow and using that ARPA money, I see that almost everything on there is a one-time expense, and I think that's very important.
It is.
Since we do know that this is a one-time way to fund things, with the exception of the program director, which will, that one we'll have to think about, after 2 years, but it's key that all these are one-time expenditures.
Well, I mean, I understand exactly what, some are, but some really aren't. Like fire trucks, you gotta replace them,
Right.
every so many years. I don't know if it's 10 years or 15 years, but, the one that's 2014, I guess that's only 8 years, but we're gonna fix that one, right?
It's in the shop getting fixed,
Okay.
but the
Okay.
idea behind that is a 10-year replacement.
Gotcha.
And with delivery being almost 2 years, we
Yeah.
try to.
The HVAC system and stuff at Parks and Rec, those things don't last forever.
That's true.
Things come out of nowhere sometimes that we have to deal with.
Right.
And the 911 system was a good example of that. That was it's one of the biggest expenses the city and the county were taking on
Yeah.
as a team effort. And, we weren't quite ready for that. So we don't know what's coming around the corner. And I don't know, I think we need to think about it.
As you look at it, we detect about a $1.2, $1.3 million structural deficit. That's probably gonna chase you into another year. But, given the constraints, what the committee has been able to cobble together this year, I think achieves something worthwhile. But it does have its challenges, and some concerns are flashing red. We would, as I say, Stacy indicated, she'll mail you these PowerPoints, email you these PowerPoints tomorrow, so you can see them in more detail. You would expect, first, just if we stay on our budget ordinance schedule, we would have first reading of the budget ordinance on May 23rd. And then the second reading and roll call vote, first reading in June, and have the budget in place and approved well before the end of this fiscal year. That gives us plenty of time for questions from council, questions for the finance committee, give us time to discuss it here. So any questions that you have now that you have this detail, your work will begin on hers. Stacy, anything else we need to do on the budget presentation at this point?
No, I don't believe so. No.
Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, and we're moving on, item 7, the chief administrative officer is a municipal order approving the contract inspector. Boils down to, we've got to make some changes for the relocation of City Hall, and this contract is very close to the same rate. We'll pick up a couple of locations. We'll pick up the Rock House, which is where the city clerk is going to be operating during the City Hall renovation. We'll also pick up
Go ahead.
wireless service at Euclid,
And service here for when we're temporarily here.
and service for when we're temporarily here. We'll have Wi-Fi or.
And, 210 Clinton Distribution Facility.
that we took over from the North County.
You need a motion, Mayor?
Please.
Motion.
Thank you.
Second, Mayor.
And second, thank you, Greg. If there are no questions on that contract, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item B, under the Chief Administrative Officer, very proud to present this municipal order recognizing Juneteenth as a Georgetown, City of Georgetown holiday. Our expectation is that with this municipal order, and take a moment and read this municipal order. It's beautifully written. I think it captures the sentiment of what this holiday is intended to mean. We would expect to approach this holiday as we do other holidays on our schedule. The city does not actually provide a 4th of July parade and things of that nature, but we acknowledge a paid holiday for city workers. And then we will work with outside groups that wish to acknowledge the holiday. But we will put this as a holiday. Stacy's calculated due to vacancies in the budget, we can do this at no additional budget cost. And I think it's something that is certainly appropriate for the city. Motion been made? And seconded. Are there any questions about this? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you. We get this done in time for June the 19th this year.
Which we'll observe on Monday, not rather than Sunday.
Yes, we will observe. Thank you. Okay, item 8 under city attorney is the second reading of the ordinance repealing the cemetery ministerial board. Sponsored by Mr. Leslie and Ms. Sanders.
Make a motion. Trying to help you out.
An ordinance repealing Georgetown Code of Ordinances, Chapter 2, Article 5, Division 9 regarding a cemetery ministerial board. Summary. 1. Repeals Chapter 2, Article 5, Division 9 of the Georgetown Code of Ordinances entitled Cemetery Ministerial Board in its entirety. 2. Provides for repeal of inconsistent laws, severability of provisions, and effective date upon passage of publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the City Clerk's Office, 100 North Fourth Street, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Introduced and publicly read for the first time April 25th, 2022. Publicly read the second time May 9th, 2022.
Thank you.
Motion, Mayor.
Motion, Mr. Leslie, is there a second? And a second. If there are no questions, we'll call the roll.
Mrs. Tackett?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Showalter?
Yes.
Mrs. Neal Sames?
Yes.
Mrs. Lesby Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Lesby?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mrs. Hambrick?
Yes.
Thank you. That board is numbered. Item 9 under city engineer, we have a municipal order approving the demolition contract for 514 South Broadway in the amount of $26,235.
Motion, Mayor.
Thank you.
Second.
And second, Martin. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I don't think I put her on the original purchase, so I'll stay consistent.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Mayor, a quick comment. I know there really wasn't much to be salvaged in there, but we did talk about trying to salvage a few things, and I assume that's still gonna happen.
Yes. There wasn't, you're right, there wasn't much.
There wasn't
If
much.
there was, we
Yeah.
should have it. Good. Item D, a municipal order approving a contract amendment for West Main Street Engineering. This contract in your packet is with Bell Engineering. They've done the work on our TAP grant. And we want to finish up this TAP grant, and we want to continue to be aware that we spent 6 years on phase 1. But there is a phase 2 and a phase 3. And while phase 1 was delayed so long because of the historic nature of the viaduct and how it would be repaired and how it would be funded, we still have those important sections that go out West Main Street that are actually going to keep people from walking in the middle of the road. So council will, I think, want to continue to pursue that TAP grant in its other phases. And this municipal order will start showing that process. Is there a motion for approval?
Motion.
Thanks, Todd.
Second.
And a second, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. And finally, item C under city engineer is our annual resolution accepting our MAP funding or municipal aid program funding. For the audience or anybody listening, this is where we get our annual street paving money. It's about $600,000 a year. And it's a good reminder for any council member that knows of a street that you think needs attention, or any citizen that knows of a street they think needs attention and needs repaving. We'd be glad to hear from you on that.
You want a motion, Mayor?
Please. I talked about it, but I didn't get a motion.
Second.
Second.
All right. Mayor, can I make a quick comment? It's literally about half of what we need, is that right? Maybe even less than half of what's needed to pave the streets.
When we did our analysis, David, we took all of our streets and looked at what it would cost us to repave them on a 20-year cycle. And 20 years will be the life of the street. And to do all of our streets on an annual basis, to have them last that long, we would need to spend $1 million a year, and we get $500,000 a year in the MAP. So it means we either take general fund dollars and add to that to pave more streets, or eventually our streets get such an average age that they don't represent the community well. So it's a trade-off. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Thank you. And finally, item 10 under the police department is a resolution authorizing a victim of crime advocacy grant application.
Motion.
And second, thank you, Connie. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? That completes our agenda. Really busy agenda with the presentation of the budget and some mayor's comments and some really helpful public comments. Before I ask for public comments, I do want to just make another statement about our citizens and their dissatisfaction with Republic, and frankly, our dissatisfaction with Republic. This has been a tough transition, and we have expected better for our citizens. And we have done our best to advocate for our citizens, but we continue to have problems. I want you to know that Devin is currently in an initiative to gather comments from department heads and others and seeking a management session with Republic. I want you to know that I escalated my contact with Republic a month ago to ask about why 2 streets were not being picked up. Elderly people that are being asked to take their garbage to another street. And I haven't been able to get them an answer in a month. And I just want you all to know that we hear our citizens and we have service complaints ourselves.
Mayor, are they any kind of a breach of contract with this much?
We're gathering information, and Devin's putting a finer point on our concerns. But I just wanted to say, for the benefit of the council and the public, we hear you. We know this is really hard, and some of it has frankly been ridiculous.
Yeah, it has, absolutely.
So,
Like the gentleman that spoke earlier with the recycling, you know, and I have said this, I've said this to you, I think the only thing, and I've said this to them as well, the only thing to save them for now revolt from the citizens of the community is the fact that you can have some curbside recycling that we didn't have before. But our community has lost so much that, and of course, we schooled our community, everybody takes advantage of that, and it's great. You But now it's so different, and they're not even doing the basics, much less all the extras that we used to do, so the frustration, I'm frustrated with it too. As you well know, it was a month, they did pick up my garbage.
We knew that Georgetown Public Works gave really good service. And we knew that our citizens were spoiled of that service. And we enjoy our public works department being good to our citizens, all the council. We were forced into this change. And for some time, I've been asking us to adapt and learn how to make this work. They've got to learn how to make it work for Georgetown and our citizens. I just want to express that to the council from the mayor, that we hear you and we hear our citizens. So, with that said, Willow, what do you have for us tonight?
I always used to go first. Look, thank you for all the hard work, Finance Committee, Mayor, Stacy, other people who give input for the budget. I know it's not an easy process. Not all of our desires are gonna be met, but I know it's a lot of hard work, and that work's not done, so we'll keep going forward, doing what we can. I had the unique opportunity to represent the city with Fire Chief, and I believe Chief Bossy was the police chief at the emergency response. I don't know what exactly we called it, but we went through a mock disaster, which was quite eye-opening. And we are not as prepared as we ought to be, nor is the county. And we are supposed to meet again in 30 days from the last meeting. And one of the main suggestions they gave was for us to have prearranged contracts with tree removal, with utilities, with extra support, even with nonprofits who are on the ready, because we have contacted them and prearranged ahead of time to be able to call them in, because the first 48 hours are the most critical. Do you have anything you want to add about that? I thought it was like riveting.
I think it generated conversation that was needed for the community. I mean, we've talked about it, have internal plans, but to bring the community as a whole together and have those discussions, got some wheels turned that needed to be turned.
Yeah. So, I don't know if we need to have a work session with the council and invite, who was the lady who presented, what was her name?
Gina, she was
Gina,
emergency man.
with the emergency management. She is willing to come in and address council and work us through bullet points of improvements that she sees need to be made both with county and city to be fully responsive in case Western Kentucky's disasters happen here. So it was a really good exercise, I thought. Did you want to add anything?
No, and we thought the Team Rubicon was really great. We thought we
It was.
call them in pretty quick, because they have resources and can make calls and do other things while we're trying to handle, roads and security, and they're trying to handle search and rescue. And it'd be great to have them as well to do their part.
The extent of what happened in Western Kentucky just changed the ante on preparation.
Yes, it did.
It made it a different ballgame, and I'm glad you all had the exercise, and Willow, you're helping raise the profile. We kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
Actually, I talked with the judge about maybe a court member or two to help you with this effort to raise your profile this winter.
Yeah, so I think it's an ongoing process. It's not over by any means, and we'll keep bringing things to council that we might be able to do, and much of it's at no cost. It's just making connections and contacting places that can be ready for us if we need it. And some of it is getting into a contractual, pre-contract, transactional. The other thing, I've been contacted by parents about the swim team. I know the pavilion is not safe, And we can make that very clear that that upper balcony will literally collapse if it's not structurally prepared. But the swim team didn't seem like they had a lot of, they didn't have a lot of advance warning, and they really have nowhere to go. So I don't know if there are any kind of conversations with the park board going forward that we can help accommodate even at this late date.
Todd and I were both talking about that just right before we started. I was with the parks, Friends of the Parks and Kimberly this afternoon. They did try to work with Woodford County, with Spindletop, and with some different entities.
And it didn't work out?
It didn't, but they're continuing to try to find options.
Okay.
It's not, Todd, speak up here if you want to. It's not, it doesn't look good or promising, but it's not dead yet.
Okay.
And the email I got for Kim, because I asked her specifically about that, they're waiting on a reply from Falling Springs.
They got that reply
Did they?
today, yeah.
Okay,
And
that
it
was, this was at 4 o'clock, so I don't know. So it's not a dead issue, but, you know,
Sounds like we're having to go further and further away from Georgetown to find a place to have a swim team.
They did have, it seemed like they had a couple of options that were possibilities, and it's, the swim board said that it was too far away to go for practices and things. And so I asked Kim, do the parents need to contact the swim board
Mhm.
to talk to them? And, you know, she really still wanted it to come through the Parks Department. She did say they're still working on it. It doesn't look promising though. And I agree with you. It sounds like it was very frustrating to not have advance warning.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that to her today, that she did say that some of the communication went out before it was ready to go out. And that caused some problems.
Okay.
these are, I recognize parents' frustration.
Yeah.
These are life safety issues.
Absolutely, that will literally
This
fall.
has to be fixed. And I'm sorry these folks have been inconvenienced. But the way they have behaved over this has been pretty stunning. I understand their frustration, but we are gonna keep their children safe.
But it's good to know that there's been conversation and it's
Right.
ongoing and it's not dead and there's a realization.
Well, and she did admit that it was quick, a quick turnaround, and that isn't how they anticipated handling that, right, Todd?
And when you do studies on a building and you find that it's unsafe, you've got to take pretty quick
Yeah, you-
action.
And it seems like, you know, it sounds like, good grief, couldn't you do it another time because it's the summer and it's swim team? And Kim reminded me that the swim team stuff is year-round anyway.
A lot of, in one of the major parts of the project requires them to actually have a platform over the pool and a crane sitting on it inside the pool area to work above with the ventilation system. So, you know, to say that it's something that can just happen like that, you know.
No.
And $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't forget that.
It's a bad situation. It's very unfortunate that it happened.
I'm sorry they lost their swim school.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that context.
Anything else, Will?
Thank you.
Just want to thank Mayor and the Finance Committee and Stacy for your hard work on the budget. Great presentation, and look forward to, I'm on vacation this week, so I get to digest.
Little light reading.
Available for questions.
Right. So, that's it. Thank you.
Just a question, when moving out of City Hall, so where's City Hall gonna be? And you mentioned Rock House, for the clerk, so where's, and we're here, so where's,
Right down at the end, the last office suite.
okay, that's where.
So we'll be right here in this complex, use this for council meetings,
Okay.
City Hall staff will be at the end suite, and the clerk's office can be in the Rock House where they can be forward-facing to the front.
Gotcha, very good.
Eddie will stick at the road garage or something. We're not sure. We'll find out.
Permanently remote.
He can work out this.
Well, thanks for the budget, it's a hard job, I know it's a hard job, so thanks for the budget, may agree, may not agree, but it's a hard job, and thanks for your work.
Thank you. Okay. Fine.
I just want to thank Stacy and everybody too, but I also want to mention that last Tuesday when we had Citizens Police Academy, learning about 911, I mentioned this in Finance Committee meeting, that it was very interesting, but one of the things, the VOCA grant that we do for the advocate, we actually got to walk in people's shoes. It was pretty interesting, so it's pretty awesome that we have someone like that helping people the way they help. So I just wanted to let you know that it was good. It was really, really interesting. So, but other than that, that's it.
And it's good, tonight, Chief Bossy is in Abu Dhabi.
Really?
Wow.
Yes, where he was then invited to speak to an international conference on drug rehabilitation. In a part of the world where drug offenses are treated very, very severely, and where we have a more modern approach, especially with our Angel Network and our Vocal program. Chief Bossy is talking about Georgetown's method of policing in Abu Dhabi, Dubai.
Wow.
This week. They paid for him to go to learn what we do in Georgetown.
It's pretty interesting, I'm gonna tell you, and it's not just drug overdoses and stuff, it's amazing what the advocates. It was amazing walking through somebody's shoes too, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had to make decisions as if we were the person, and
Yeah.
they were really hard
They were
decisions.
very hard.
And in that case, it was a domestic violence situation. There's a lot of, it was a very compelling exercise.
Very eye-opening.
And I will say, we have such top-notch teachers. We've been in this, we're about to be through with the police academy, and every single week we wonder if it's gonna be as good as it was the week before, and it never disappoints.
No.
It's a great program if you ever get a chance to
If
go
any
through
citizen
it.
wants to do it, you're welcome to do it.
And you're in there, right?
Yeah.
Yep. It's,
It was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, very much, very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
First, you did a great job with everybody with the budget. It's amazing, all the stuff that goes into that. Biggest thing, May 15th through the 21st, National Police Officers Memorial Week. We've had some people that have been affected by that for years and passed away in the line of duty. They're not only involved at Richmond, but in Washington DC as well. So that's going on this next week. And then I know it's not in the budget this year, city risk managers. Where are we on that?
Employees.
Okay. Okay.
Employees can call me.
Okay. I had somebody ask me, so.
He started and he's already doing fantastic work.
Okay, I had somebody ask me and I wasn't aware.
We've had him help us with a variety of issues, and very senior, and got a good way about him. So employees don't tend to, sometimes employees in the culture tend to blow off the risk manager. But I think this guy got a really good way about him. Got to be effective.
And I now remember that we've spoken about it before, so it just had a moment. Other than that, that's all I got.
It was good.
just want to say thank you for putting this all together. I look forward to diving in and asking questions. And I know I spoke with the mayor, and I spoke with Chief Bossy before, when we looked at the budget, what we thought it was going to look like. And we don't have everything that we would like to have in here. And but we are a team, and we have what we can do. And just because we don't have something in this budget doesn't mean that it is not foremost in our minds for, for the future. So I just wanted to add that. But otherwise, I'm good.
Thanks, Deb. Mark?
Andrew and Devin, I apologize for bringing this up. I know there was some conversation last week, so my apologies for this. You mentioned right before we started our comments about the garbage. And I know another council member and I had some discussion last week, and if possible, with the blessing of you and also the Public Works Committee, I think it could, again, it's my personal opinion, I think it could be beneficial if another communication was sent out to the general public on what can and can't be picked up, whether it's in the can or not in the can, just not taking it for granted that people know, if we can do that.
We can do that, Mark. And I think maybe after Devin's meeting and if we can get more clarity, we renew that message. What you can and can't do, let's start a do-over, let's start a new communication. Let's talk to each other, because people are really unhappy. So, anything else, Mark? Anything else come forward, council? If not, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.